Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And if you're still taking that survey, please keep going. That's okay. Thank you so much, first, for being here today, for your time, for your effort. It's invaluable. And we're so grateful to you and for all the time that you're spending with us this weekend in service to our community and to our neighbors. So that's number one, just thanks. Thanks for showing up. That's the first step towards social change, is just making the decision to be present. And now, so my name is Stacy Cruz. I'm with the Giving Spirit in Educational Programming, and it has always been. Tom always says that the Giving Spirit has always had dual missions. One mission is direct outreach, direct service to those that are experiencing housing insecurity, and the second part of that mission is education, immersive educational experiences. So for those of you that are going to be actually going out into the streets this afternoon and tomorrow, that's a part of that, is having a chance to talk to people, relate to others as just neighbors and fellow Los Angelinos, hear their stories. This is another part of that education experience, is us talking about facts and about the reality that people are experiencing in the city, and having a chance to ask questions, get some answers, and then walk away with that new information. We have found over the years, and we know that that is really important to us expanding our perspectives, is getting good information and being able to share that. So thanks for those that are standing in the back. We want to make this really dynamic. We're going to have a chance to meet our panelists, learn some information, and then we'll have a chance for Q&A at the end too. So log away in the back of your mind any questions that you have, because we've got two experts up here that'll be able to share information with us. And I'm going to introduce them first, and then we'll kind of ground this conversation in some of the facts around youth homelessness in our country and in our state and city. But let's meet them first. So to my right is Erin Casey. Erin is the Director of Programs at My Friend's Place, which is a local nonprofit in Hollywood that works with, over 1,000 young people that are experiencing homelessness ages 12 to 22. So a huge swath there. To the right of her is Juwan Sullivan, who is an actor, writer, producer, who has experienced houselessness himself, who's going to tell us what his journey was in navigating those challenges as a young adult in Los Angeles. So thank you to both of you for being with us today. Your expertise is just invaluable. And now we're going to start with some facts, because we always want to make sure that we learn something new along with service. And I'm a data junkie, so I always go looking for numbers. So I'm just going to, first, I thought it would be really helpful to frame what is homeless youth? How does that get categorized? And I learned something new today. We always learn something new when I was talking to Erin. So California, so the way that the California Department of Education defines homeless youth, I'm going to read it, refers to unaccompanied minors ages 12 through 17 who are living apart from their parents or legal guardians, and young adults ages 18 through 24 who are experiencing unstable or inadequate living situations, such as sleeping on friends' couches, staying in shelters, living under bridges, abandoned buildings, and on the streets. So that's how the Department of Education in California defines homeless youth. I just found out, talking to Erin, that is not the way that HUD defines homeless youth. They don't count individuals that are sharing spaces or living on couches. So we know that even these numbers that I'm going to give you, we know that they're off, because even our own agencies in the state and on the federal level aren't using the same definitions to count what is homeless, to define what is homeless. So, okay, so now keep in mind that the numbers that I'm going to share, these are government numbers. So the reality is that it's not less than this, but it's likely a lot more. And I think it's really helpful to frame. So what the US government says, the current count, so this is last year's count, 2022, is that there are between 1.6 and 1.7 million individuals ages 12 to 17 experiencing homelessness. That was in 2022. That's a 12% increase since the start of COVID. And it's just continuing to climb. And that of that number, between 300,000 and 400,000 are expected to be homeless on any given day or night. Next set of numbers. Individuals ages 18 to 19, okay, now get a load of the range here, somewhere between 80,000 and 170,000. So maybe 80,000, maybe double that or more, individuals ages 18 to 19 And that means about 5% of the homeless population nationwide is between 18 and 19 years old. And between the ages of 18 or 20 to 24, somewhere between 124,000 individuals to 250,000 individuals. That's how hard it is to establish a realistic count. And I know Jawan is going to share some of that with us as well. It's incredibly difficult to pin down numbers because oftentimes as individuals get older, they camouflage well. That was a word that Aaron used. People don't want to be identified. And so we're not entirely sure how many individuals out there between the ages of 18 and 24 are experiencing homelessness. These are just the ones that are currently participating in government services that we know of. And in fact, we were even talking earlier about the Los Angeles area homeless count, which we'll remind you of that later. That's a great way to volunteer. It's essential. The way that you're trained when you participate in the homeless count is it's just visual. So if you see a tent, you count that as one person. If you see a vehicle that maybe someone lives in, you count that as a person living in that vehicle. So even those numbers are likely a dramatic undercount. So just to kind of frame that, so that number of individuals, so just in California, California has the largest population of individuals between the ages of 18 and 24 and under 18 that are experiencing homelessness. The count last year was that there's approximately 200,000 young people under the age of 18. And we don't really know how many 18 to 24-year-olds. This is California's like, I don't know, thousands, tens of thousands, we're not really sure, experiencing homelessness. So in context, that's like if the entire school district of San Diego Unified, that's 110,000 students, and the entire school district of Fresno Unified, that's 72,000 students. Imagine if all of them were homeless. That's how many homeless individuals under the age of 18. So school-age students that we have in California. So that's the reality. And it's why it's so important that we do things like this, that we understand the numbers and that we become those change agents, taking those facts with us when we leave. But we really want to dig into more stories. So how does that happen? So Jawan, well, why don't we start off first? Why don't you tell us 2 things about yourself, and then we'll get into those stories, what your journey has been. So Jawan, 2 things about yourself.
2 things about myself, just anything.
Anything about yourself.
Okay. Boba brings me joy, so that's one thing.
Didn't know that.
And yeah, when I was a kid, my dream was to be a superhero. Yeah.
Okay, so it's an important question. Invisibility or flight?
Flight.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't want to ride Spirit Airlines anymore, so flight, yeah.
Okay, Erin, 2 things about you.
Okay, I'm gonna be inspired. So I go to bed dreaming of my first cup of coffee in the morning.
Yes.
And that's why I'm excited to get up in the morning. And my superpower is I can fall asleep anywhere.
We have these things in common.
Mm-hmm.
I also fall asleep. So, okay, so thank you. Now we know 2 things about you that I didn't know before. Boba brings you joy, so now we know this, and coffee brings you joy. Can you tell us about what was your direct experience in homelessness? What was your journey?
It's so multi-layered, but I'll try to just concise it. I was thrown into homelessness when I was 16. There was a breakdown in my family. My parents initially separated, and I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Atlanta, outside of Atlanta, so fairly normal life, but my parents separated. Moved in with my grandmother. She, was taking care of myself and my younger sister and my mom. And when she passed away, I felt like that was the breakdown of the family unit. And yeah, me and my mom had a strained relationship around my teenage years. And yeah, once my grandmother passed away, I was kind of just on my own, and I had to figure it out. And I think you mentioned it. It was such a traumatic experience that I'm still working through as a 34-year-old, of just having that foundation ripped from up under you, especially having a fairly normal life. But yeah, from 16 to about 21, I just couch surfed. I wasn't able to finish high school because I had to make a decision: do I either finish school or do I get a job in order to survive and be an adult as a teenager? So yeah, I was able to get back on my feet in my early 20s, and, you know, again, have a fairly normal life. But when I was 23, I moved to Los Angeles, and that cycle kind of happened again. Again, not having a foundation to build upon, not having family and support, and then being a little ignorant of how expensive it was out here in Los Angeles, and coming out here pursuing a dream, I fell into that cycle again. So yeah.
And you know, I'm glad. Thank you for sharing your story. We know that there are common reasons that youth will fall into homelessness or housing insecurity, and the breakdown of the family unit is a really common one.
Yeah.
So that's one of those myths that we need to unseat as well, is that, you know, and we've heard this before, we've all heard it, that a lot of the people that are homeless youth, that maybe they were runaways. Some are, but that's a rare reason that people start on that journey. It's oftentimes the breakdown of the family unit, or sometimes a feeling of unsafety within the family unit where people feel like they might be safer on the street than at home. And so thank you for sharing that. And then we'll circle back around to your story again as well. So Aaron, you work with a direct service provider in a really high needs, high concentration area in Los Angeles. Can you tell us a little bit about My Friend's Place? And then also, what brought you to working with them? I know you've worked with them for a really long time. So what has your journey been in working with a direct service provider?
Yeah. So My Friend's Place is in Hollywood, and we've been serving the Hollywood community it'll be 36 years in January, and I've been there for nearly 20 of them. I think what brought me into this work, I was sharing earlier with someone, I had the privilege, and I really want to name that as a privilege, of doing a graduate program at UCLA in social work. I'm a really proud social worker. And part of that experience is we would have a module where we toured Skid Row. And I was walking the streets of Skid Row for 10 seconds before I really just made this very personal declaration that so long as I lived in Los Angeles, that I would work in the space of solving homelessness. That was in 2003, and you know, back then, like, my mantra to myself, right, is like homelessness was the biggest social, racial, and economic justice issue of our time. And 20 years later, that is never been more true. So homelessness really is a social justice issue. And I think what I have really come to appreciate throughout my years of being on the front line is like, this is a human-made problem. And the only thing that's good about that is it also means that humans in this room, can solve it. We can just decide as a country that homelessness is not acceptable. It should really feel like a stain on our social fabric that we allow people to have no place to use the bathroom, that we allow people to be in tents during storms, right? This needs to start meaning something to us and have it be something like everyone, and there's other countries that do this better. I think that's the other part of it, right? So it just has to be that housing justice is part of what we value as a people, and that people deserve to be indoors. So My Friend's Place, we are a crisis resource drop-in center for youth and young adults experiencing homelessness or housing instability, ages 12 to 24, and actually we've just expanded our services to age 30 because we were seeing that young people were turning 24, aging out of the youth system of care, having to go into the adult system of care, and just being completely lost. So we are extending our services with the hope that we can lean into the connections and the relationships that we build to help young people really navigate into that adult system. So Hollywood and Venice, Santa Monica is generally thought to be some of the places that young people will gravitate towards because they're service enriched. In the past 6-7 years, the county has really tried to have services in all of the service planning areas, but they're not equitable at this point. So Hollywood continues to have a lot of services. And I do want to say my expertise is not in the experience of family homelessness with minors or with children. We serve about 2% 12 to 17-year-olds, and those are largely folks who are not attached to family units, and oftentimes running from a foster care placement because so many times because that foster care placement is not honoring of their identity, particularly if they are someone who identifies as LGBTQIA.
You know, and to tack onto that, the concept of foster youth. So I think probably everyone knows that when we talk about aging out of foster care, it's either when an individual turns 18 or graduates from high school. So if you graduate from high school at 17, you age out of, you can't stay in group homes anymore. And so, in fact, in California, 1 in 4 individuals who age out of foster care become homeless. So that's a whole additional conversation there.
Yep.
Now Joanne, I want to come back to you, particularly because of the age range in which you were navigating housing insecurity and houselessness. Why do we think it's so difficult to get a count of individuals if they're not involved in an institution? Like if they're not being counted by a school or counted, by an organization, why is it so hard to get a count? And we hear that a lot too, because we're going to be going out and doing direct outreach. And you might be thinking, okay, well, now wait a minute. If there are tens of thousands of homeless young people in Los Angeles, why am I not seeing them? Why is that?
Yeah.
Do you think?
I'll speak from my experience. For me, I think even when I was experiencing homelessness, I had a misconception of what it meant to be homeless. I had, the idea that if you're homeless, you made terrible decisions, you were probably on drugs, alcoholism, that whole streamline of thought that we have. But for me, that wasn't the case. It was just a lack of support, a lack of community and family and structure. I felt like a lone wolf a lot of my life, so I was just figuring out life as it was happening to me as a young person with no guidance. And for me, there was a sense of pride of, I don't want anybody to know what I'm going through. So I was very good at hiding that I was homeless. I think coming from my upbringing and having a really strict grandmother, I knew how to just put everything together, So when I was here in Los Angeles experiencing homelessness for like a good year and a half, for the most part, I would sleep on the bus. I know the metro system really well because I figured out which buses ran 24 hours so I can sleep, and I knew, I would ride from Santa Monica Beach to downtown and do that back and forth for 4 hours, and I would calculate, I can sleep here. And, I had friends in Atlanta who were rooting me on, and I still was in contact with my dad, and he didn't even know what was going on. So I had a little bit of support where I would, get money sent to me. My dad would Western Union me money, and I would use that to go take showers at Korean spas in Koreatown. So I figured out this system of how to maintain an image where people wouldn't look at me and say, oh, that guy's homeless. For the most part, I walked around with a duffel bag and a book bag, and I would use my money to go wash my clothes and take showers. So I just looked like a college student on the street, just maybe commuting, but I had my whole life in those bags. And there were days where I wouldn't shower for 3-4 days at a time. There were days where I didn't eat. And it got to a point where some days my entire day would just be focused on how do I keep this image of not looking like I'm deteriorating and my inner world reflecting outwardly. So I think a lot of people can get caught in that, and we miss those people because they're just trying to maintain there's some dignity and some sense of pride within themselves, and they just are blending in. So I was one of those people that were blending in at the bus stop or at a coffee shop with their computer out that you just think is a regular person, but they're really just trying to figure out how am I going to make it through this day. So yeah.
And that's such a good reminder of that we hear it from the time that we're little, right? Like you shouldn't judge people based on their appearances, but truly, you really don't know what someone is going through. And I want to ask you the same question about what you're finding about why is it difficult to plug people into services. But when you were mentioning you had a schema in place, like you would take showers at the Korean spa. One of our panelists, Ezzy, he's actually going to be coming in the afternoon and speaking to the veterans experience. I remember him saying one time that he had learned that if he folded his clothes, if he could get his clothes rinsed out and reasonably dry, if he folded them a certain way and he slept on them, he could get a really nice crease on his pants and on his shirts. And so you wouldn't, if he went for job interviews or went for services, you wouldn't think, well, that's someone that woke up in a tent this morning, because he was working very hard to maintain that dignity and wasn't going to have that conversation with someone unless he had to. So yeah, we just can't judge. Now, Aaron, what about you all? You search such a wide range of individuals. What have you found or experienced? Are there challenges in getting people through the door to get them plugged into services?
Yeah, what we acknowledge as a team every day is it is an act of bravery anytime a young person takes a chance on us and walks through our door. It is for any of us, right? Who finds it really easy to ask for help? Not me, right? And we're perfect strangers. And this is life or death kind of help, right? And so many of the young people that do take that are brave enough to walk through the doors, they have been let down by adults in their life. Sometimes the people that were meant to take care of them were the ones that harmed them the most, right? So when we think about, so many young people who experience homelessness have also had really complex trauma in their early growing up formative years. And what that does, our ability to trust is for anyone to be able to receive services, you really do have to have a positive experience with trusting someone. And that is a privilege. If you have that, if you have felt cared for in your life, if you have felt that someone in your life was trustworthy, that is a privilege. And it's a privilege that a lot of people do not have. Yeah. So I think what my friend's place actually stopped doing formal outreach early on in our history, because what was happening is that the best outreach is when another young person turns to someone and says, hey, I think there's this spot down the street that might be able to help you out too. And I trust them, and so come along with me, right? So our net promoter score is really, really high. Young people, most often this past year we served 900 individual young people, and most of them came to us because another young person referred them our way. So yeah, coming through the door in general, and then here's the truth of it. For every young person who is experiencing homelessness on the street, I think the stat, and the bed count might have changed recently, but for every 300 young people, there's one bed. So just by taking that brave step and coming into a service center like ours and saying, hey, I'm on the streets, I need help, more often than not, we're doing exactly what Joanne said. We're saying our doors closed, we're a drop-in center, right? So we provide day shelter, we don't have overnight shelter. It is in our strategic plan to own and operate our own housing. But at the end of the day, when we can't get someone a bed, we are talking about the buses that run 24 hours. We are talking about the McDonald's that are open 24 hours. We're giving away movie tickets, so you can spend at least 4 hours at night safe inside a movie theater. But we are not, Los Angeles can do better. We're not doing better. But just asking for help does not mean that the resources are there.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. It's something I wouldn't have thought of either. Yeah. So if you see young people that are sitting inside of a movie theater or have been at McDonald's all day, we cannot judge. You have no idea what their experience is. Well, we want to make sure, we want to get everybody back to work, and we want to make sure that we have a chance to get some questions from the audience. So I want to ask two quick questions, and then we'll send the mic out to the audience. So Joanne, let's have you go first. What is one thing that you wish that people knew about individuals that are youth that are experiencing homelessness? And what is one thing that you think that anybody could do to be supportive? So one thing you wish people knew, and one thing that anybody could do. Outside of being here, you all are here. That's a first step. But something else that you might be able to think of.
I think my answer will just tie in both questions. One thing I wish people knew and would do would be to be ferocious with your kindness. Because me being extracted out of that pit that I was in, it was purely off of people's kindness and people seeing me and people going above and beyond to make sure I was safe, to let me know that I was safe. And even now, a lot of the people who stepped in for me, and one of my best friends, I was with her last night, she was one of the first people I met in LA when I was going through that period of homelessness, and it was her kindness that made me feel safe enough to tell her, like, hey, we were hanging out and she didn't even know I was homeless. You know, I would tell her to drop me off. I'm like, oh yeah, I live down the street and I'm actually going to the bus stop a block away. But I didn't feel safe enough to tell her. But it was her kindness and her willingness to just hear me out and to not judge me. I think that opened up for me what I have now, which is a family, a chosen family. She was kind of like the catalyst for me to be thrusted into a community of people to where everyone rallied around me. And one of the pains that I've dealt with of life is just not feeling like I had family and not feeling like I had that support. And now I do. I can say that I do. And it started from her kindness that gave me permission to be vulnerable and to open up with her. So I think we sometimes underestimate kindness and just how acknowledging someone and saying, hey, how you doing today, can be the shift that someone needs to open up and, you know, and get out of their spirit, out of their heart, what they really need to share for that moment. So yeah, kindness.
So Tom, I think that's a new hashtag. Hashtag beginning spirit, hashtag ferocious kindness. That's a shirt for
There you
next
go.
year. Okay, so Aaron, something that you wish everybody knew about youth homelessness or those that are experiencing it, and something anybody could do.
It's hard to distill that first one. I think if a young person that I've had the honor of working with were in this seat instead of me, what they would say is that they would want you to know that, I'm getting emotional, that they are striving humans, that they need this to be a circumstance, a time in their life that does not define them, that it doesn't define them, right? We are not defined by the most awful, terrible things that happen to us. I think they would also want you to know that, and Juwan, in listening to your story, I'm just so reminded about this. What they have gone through and how they have survived it make them some of the smartest, fiercest leaders that our community can hope for. And so if you're in places where you can hire young people who can name, like, oh, I don't have that experience, but have you ever survived 10 days in Los Angeles without a place to live? Because I promise you, I can do that job.
Yeah.
You have got to be so creative and persistent and self-confident to survive a night on the streets. And that transfers into employability skills in a way that I don't think that we give enough credit to. That's one of the struggles with young people experiencing homelessness is, when we talk about people living in poverty, like so much of that poverty is the lack of social connections, right? So they don't have the connections, but they absolutely have the skills. They just need someone to give them a shot.
Yeah.
And the ways in which we stigmatize poverty, the ways in which we stigmatize all sorts of things, right? We're not giving these young people shots. And given the right opportunity, they can take it from there. They really can. And we just have to show up for them and give them the right opportunity. There's lots of ways that you can help us specifically, and I left some material behind. But I think what I would want to say, especially because there's so many young faces here, part of this is we have to change the public dialogue and we have to change the public perception, and that is what all of you can do, right? And I'm not asking you to go toe-to-toe with someone who is, talking disparagingly about homelessness, but seed planting. Just end a conversation by saying, but I wonder the role of trauma in that. Gosh, don't you wonder what that person has been through? What the slogan that the amazing colleagues that I get to do this work with, right? We all know, and we know it like in our core, and Juwan's story tells this too, most of us are one paycheck and one family member away from being in this experience ourselves. And that's not lost on us. It's a grandmother, right? That is so often the story that we hear at my friend's place of how people entered into homelessness. Their one family member that raised them died, right? Think of the one person that you count on and think of not having them. And what would any of us do, right? And in a city like Los Angeles, this is not an easy city. It is not an affordable city. Some of the strategies and interventions that are working in other cities to solve homelessness, they do not work here because it is not affordable. It just isn't. So seed plant, whenever you have the opportunity to just slightly try to move the needle on how someone thinks about the issue, that's what I would really recommend. Be an ambassador. You don't have to go toe-to-toe. Just plant some seeds.
That's good.
Thank you both so much. And those are, you shared things that any of us could do. Any of us can choose to be ferociously kind. Any of us can choose to be emissaries for information and to choose to be more involved if we want to. We are so glad you're here. And if you want to do more to support organizations in this topic, My Friend's Place is a great place to get information. Their website is great as far as information goes as well, just fact-based information. And Erin has brought some flyers. We'll make sure that they're out in the registration and snack area if you want to learn more. And now we know we've got Tom here, our founder. I know, Tom, you want to say a few words?
So how many first-timers do we have here? Awesome. How many outreach folks are going out later today or this weekend? Not enough. Okay, hopefully by the end of this thing, I will encourage more of you to go. So I want to do a little exercise with all of you. So how many people remember last winter? How many people remember the rain and the storms we got consistently over the month of February? Okay, so do this exercise with me. Close your eyes. Okay, all of you, close your eyes. Now imagine that everything that you own, everything that is important to you, everything that allows you to be human and exist is in your tent, you're in your RV, or you're under a underpass or in an awning. Imagine a gully washer comes in on a Tuesday. Everything that you have is now extremely soaking wet, destroyed, right? And so you have to rebuild overnight because what's happening in 2 more days? Another storm comes. So you don't have enough time to dry everything that you have. So all your food, your driver's license, your immigration papers, your kids' homework, gone. Next week, another storm comes. You have nothing by that time. Most of it's been washed down in the sewers. Okay? So you can open your eyes now. Pick up your phone. Open up your weather app. Tell me what you see is happening in the weather next week. The rain. A huge storm's coming. Guess what? Thanks to you and so many people that came here yesterday and before today, 1,200 people are going to have tarps. They're going to have ponchos. They're going to have umbrellas. They're going to have plastic bags to put their stuff in. They're going to have plastic containers to put their stuff in. So when those storms start, and tons of socks, and hats, and gloves, and things to keep them warm, because of what you're doing today and those that are coming tomorrow and before you, over 1,000 people will be able to brave the winter of Los Angeles. So give yourselves a big round of applause. So how many of you will look at the rain and storms differently next week? Hopefully with warm hearts, but also understanding we're only helping 1,200 people. And there's 100,000 out there right now, all over LA City and LA County. So our work is still lots to be done. So this weekend, this direct outreach is a manifestation of who we are. So the first mile of care is what you're able to build out in the streets, right? So survival assistance, hope and sustenance. The second is what you're experiencing here. It's the first mile of learning, okay? And so the state of homelessness in LA, some of you might know this, it's increased 10% year to year, right? So, and that's actually lower than we know because there are a lot of folks that go uncounted, right? So it's much higher than that. So the 100,000 figure is, we believe, is conservative, right? You all see it, right? I mean, you see the numbers, you see the encampments, some of them have disappeared. The mayor's done a pretty good job, at least getting them off the streets. But we're finding out that they're coming back because the services aren't there. And so we have had a tough year in terms of raising money and volunteerism. Volunteerism is off 60% since 19. In 19, we had 1,000 people on Saturday at 11 o'clock. The mayor was here. It was unbelievable. We took care of 3,000 people in 2019, okay? So we're only gonna be able to take care of 1,200 because funding is down as well for services. Now, Housing First is a great initiative, right? And we believe that a lot of our folks do need housing, but a lot of them don't. Jay didn't need a house, right? Jay needed other things to get him to the next place where eventually he might need a house. But here's the thing. We feel these blanket policies are actually working, but we're not actually going out in the street and seeing if they're working. And that's what outreach does for us. I mean, I started the Giving Spirit because I was a journalist as an undergrad, and I was a journalist when I got out of school because I was curious, right, Mom? So I was always the kid asking questions, always wanting to know why. So when I came here and saw how bad it was, it's like, there's got to be a reason why that mom's got 3 kids going to school and she's working 2 jobs and can't afford to pay for rent. There's got to be a reason there's a veteran standing in the middle of Wilshire Boulevard and right in front of the VA, walking the streets in a gown and a bracelet, screaming at the moon. Right? What's going on? So that's why outreach was why we're here today, because I found out and I realized that we don't know enough. So Stacy and her team were dedicated to education and community awareness. So you, as Stacy said, and as Aaron said, and Jay said as well, you have to ask. Asking is the most important thing. Ask why. You've got people in your own neighborhood that you drive by every day. Like, why is that person still there? Well, pull over. Right now you have a kit that you can bring them, so grab one. We encourage everyone to, if you're not going to go directly out with us, service your neighborhood. There's not a reason. That's outreach. So when the people, hopefully at the end of this, now that when you raise your hands, like, yeah, I know that guy. There's always this guy at the 7-Eleven. You know, always wanted to know why he's always there. Now you can find out. Use these kits, right, as a door opener. Not only for them to understand why folks are out there to care about them, so that reunites them with humanity and re-engages, as Austin says in Austin's shirt, their hope in humanity because they've lost it, right? So, but then you also start to learn and understand, wow, if I was that person, if I was Juwan, right? Then you start to relate it. And what we do at the Giving Spirit so well, and what Stacey's going to talk to you about what we're doing digitally next year, is we make poverty relatable. That's so important because we have very, very, very wonderful lives. We have a lot to be grateful for. And you've earned it. We've earned all of it. There's no shaming here. We don't do that here. We just want you to learn so you can make better decisions, not only for when you're raising your kids, when they come back with questions like, Mom, why does that kid smell so bad? And I'm not saying that you would do that. I'm saying, but there's a question. Why is that girl always sitting by herself and wearing the same clothes? You then, as an enlightened parent, can say, let me tell you why. Because we discovered that, right? And we have content now that we've got online that will be becoming more prevalent that will teach you why. You can have this conversation together, right? And so, Stacey's about to talk about this incredible new program for next year, so I'm going to steal thunder. But learning is the key, right? So people come to me and say, what's the answer, Tom? Is us. We need to understand them because they're us, right? And so we started out by immersively learning in the streets, and we have content development. Now we're digitizing that. So it's getting we just started talking about it with some key partners. Our first key partner was Harvard Business School. So Harvard Business School is engaged with us and giving us advice and counsel for free right now. We hope it continues that way. But they see what we're onto, and according to one of our professors who sold 2 online digital platforms, we are onto something that could change the way people learn. And this is just the alpha version of this, right? And the second partner is Tita and Manu here, right? So it's still hard for me to even say these words, but I will because I have evidence of it here in the room. We're now partners with Pope Francis. So Pope Francis and Tita and Manu, who run an organization called Escolas Ocarentes, who now moved their offices from DC to LA just because of us. No, just kidding. But we are now, the Pope knows all about our work. The Pope, and we can tell you about why we're partners with the Pope. Actually, they can tell you why we're partners with the Pope, because they're a much more credible source than me. Well, maybe not, but we're so proud to be aligned with these 2 new partners, right? And it's a secular organization, so it's all about kids and engagement and education through sport and just by getting them to roll up their sleeves and taking ownership of their civic communities, right? That's why we're a perfect partner for them. But this is going to be part of why the Pope is involved with us, right? Because we can digitize this and get it out to more people around the world. So that's who we are. We started out with Paramount shopping bags, and now we've got duffel bags and women's programs and companion animal programs. But that's all these are opportunities for you to extend your grace and love to those that are out there. So I want to leave you with this because we got to run. I got to get downtown. Come out with us if you can. It's an amazing experience. You're coached well. We'll protect you downtown. You know, I've been doing this for 25 years. We know where we're going. Come out and experience this for yourself so you can become better ambassadors for us going forward. And if you have money in your budget for giving, we are $80,000 in the hole. We had to finance this out of reserves. So it's the first time we've ever had to do that. It's because of the tough year we've had as a services organization versus housing. So please help us, right? And so I'll throw it back to Stace because I got to go. But bless all of you for being here, and please spread the word because I'd like to get back to 1,000 people here next year. So we got a whole year to work on this, guys. So I'm counting on all of you to be great disciples. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for keeping me inspired, keeping all of us to inspire those that are still out there that need everything we can give them. All right? God bless you all. Thanks.
Okay, so before we turn over to questions, I'm going to take my turn to say one thing I wish everybody knew and one thing that everybody could do. So one thing I wish everybody knew actually speaks to that outreach. It's not scary. That's what I wish everybody knew. It's not scary to engage with someone that happens to be experiencing homelessness. That doesn't mean be unsafe. There are people out there legitimately that are experiencing their own mental health challenges. It would put them in an unsafe situation and you in an unsafe situation if you were to engage with them. We are not sending anybody into those situations. And I will say, as much as clearly you could tell, I'm shy. I'm not shy. I'll talk to anybody. I live in Chatsworth, and I don't know if anybody lives on the west side of the valley, but the explosion in people that are living homeless or living in encampments or vehicles on that side of the valley it's just been off the charts since COVID started. And even with the volunteerism that I do here, I would never have felt comfortable approaching anyone in any of those tents or situations to have a conversation with them. It felt intrusive, or I felt like it felt a little scary. I never felt confident doing that until I did outreach with the Giving Spirit. And now I know some of those people by name. A lot of them are the age of my son. That was a shock to my family. That doesn't mean that you should approach a tent by yourself. You shouldn't. You should get the training. You should be with others. But I'm not just saying it because I'm with the Giving Spirit. I really felt like the outreach experience here gave me that confidence to go have those conversations with my neighbors. And I'm really grateful that I did because I got to know those stories. So that's something I would say anybody, you can, if you've got the time, go this afternoon, go tomorrow. It's a really worthwhile experience, genuinely. The other thing anybody can do, and it's what Tom was alluding to, those 2 posters that you see up there, they've got QR codes on the bottom. Don't scan those QR codes now. I'm going to put them out in the lobby. You can scan them later. We want to try to bring this experience to as many people as we can, where we share facts, we dialogue, we hear stories, and get a sense of what it's like to experience some of those challenges that people do when they're living in housing insecure situations. So we are creating an immersive digital experience. We are going to have our pilot ready in early 2024, and we need people to kick the tires. So the QR codes on the bottom of those 2 posters are just you registering interest. If you as an individual, as a family, as a teacher, as a manager, as another service provider, if you're curious, if you would be willing to give your input, that's what we're looking for. So I'm going to put those out in the main hall. Scan them. Would love to contact you later if you're interested in seeing what that experience is like. And on your way out as well, I said we were going to give you another survey. This QR code is for after the learning experience. We're just curious what you might be taking away with you as you walk out the door. So make sure you answer that for us.
The Housing and Urban Development at the federal level, they do not count couch surfing, what's referred to as couch surfing, as the definition of homelessness. So anytime you're seeing numbers at the federal level, just know that they are grossly underreporting because, again, so many of the young people that we serve every day are couch surfing. That means every once in a while, they can stay on their auntie's house if they're able to turn over some food stamps or something like that. Or so long as their relationship with their girlfriend is okay, they can crash on the couch, right? So we've been advocating for years. My whole career has been advocating there. There's a couple other things I want to point out, if you didn't know this. You cannot be a recipient of a Section 8 voucher and be a full-time student. So young people, if you have to receive Section 8 housing, right, you have handicapped your educational dreams and aspirations to stay in housing. Again, when I started in this work in 2004, the cash aid amount, if you're in Los Angeles County and receiving general relief, was $221. What do you think it is today? $221. Even to like some of the younger folks in the room, are you living off of $221 a month? Right? It's not possible, right? So that's another huge point of advocacy. The other thing is that in young people, not only are they invisibilized, they are also not considered when we talk about long-term strategies. So those of us who are working in the homeless youth space, we are constantly in meetings at every level saying, and what about the young people? So there's this idea that any intervention that we go for, it has to have set-aside strategies and set-aside funding for the experience of homelessness that young people have, because it is not the same as adult homelessness. And if we continue, I always use the analogy of airbags. Perhaps folks know this. When airbags were first tested, they were tested on the standard adult male. So airbags were built into cars, and who died? Women, because they were not tested on women, right? Same thing with homelessness. If we only apply the interventions that we think work with adults on young people will die. Or they just won't be served to the extent that they need to be served. So there's so many policy issues that we are working on all of the time, sometimes that can be the most demoralizing part of it, is that when the policies and the system, people always ask me, like, how do you do this work for 20 years? It must be so hard. The work with young people is not hard. The work with systems and systems of oppression, that's what's hard. That's what's demoralizing.
All right, well, I think we're going to wrap this up, and I want to thank our incredible expert speaker. The work that you do is so incredible. For sharing your story, and I had a burning question to ask about your education, but maybe I'll check in with you because we do have to wrap it up. And to each of you for being here today, giving us your presence, your time, your spirit, your energy, and taking the seeds and scattering them out there in our community. God bless you.
Yeah.
Good to see you.